Hey, this is Ross Payton with Role Playing Public Radio. This is RPPR episode 159, The Witcher role-playing game breakdown. As we break down the new Witcher RPG with a new person, fairly new for RPPR, Burke. Say hi, Burke.
Hey, hi.
Burke was in... he's been in a couple of APs already. The As Blossoms Falls. What else? Some games that haven't been posted yet, and we'll be
Sure.
getting them in some more stuff in the future. Anyways, Burke, how are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm super excited. And listen to As Blossoms Fall if you haven't
Yes.
already. I'm serious.
It's
Really, really good.
It's a very entertaining game. Bridget ran an amazing scenario for us at Gen Con with a unique system and something worth checking out. First off, we do have a bit of news. Speaking of Gen Con, I've decided as a new extra reward, I'm improving, sort of expanding our early access system on the RPPR Patreon to where all of our Gen Con materials can be posted one panel or actual play per week. Until all of it is posted, but each one of those is going to have 30 days of early access. So we have a number of panels. We have Bridget has at least two other games. Thad recorded a game for us of Delta Green. So if you want to hear that, Thad was a player in that game. Shane Ivey actually ran it for Delta Green backers. And I'm going to put more stuff out in early access as a new, to expand that $5 reward system. So,
Yeah, it's awesome.
yeah. But anyways, at Gen Con, again, speaking of Gen Con, we picked up copies of the Witcher role-playing game.
I did. I stood in line. I was one of those chumps that was there at 10 first day.
Yep. And I picked it up. Well, I didn't pick it up. Actually, Maddie, a friend of RPPR, did that for me. Thanks, Maddie. This is the first new game put up by our Talsorian Games in quite some time. This is a collaboration with CD Projekt Red. And of course, if you aren't familiar, The Witcher is also a series of video games that CD Projekt Red has put out. Very successful, especially The Witcher 3. And this was, of course, originally based on a series of novels, fantasy novels, originally written in Polish. Some of them have been translated into English, but not all of them.
There's actually a lot. There's like 7. I didn't realize there were so many Witcher books until I looked into it.
Yeah, it's quite popular in Poland, and of course now there are also fan translations. Not all the novels have been officially translated, but I think all of them have been fan translated at least. So if you know where to look for those things, you can probably find it. But that would be wrong, I think. So
That's probably true.
yeah. Before we get into the game mechanics, the game system itself, to explain a little bit about the Witcher setting, if you're already familiar with it, then, you don't need to listen to this, but this couple of minutes. It's a dark fantasy setting. Thematically, I would think it's closest to Warhammer Fantasy in terms of theme and sort of content. It's a very European take on the sort of the fantasy genre, which is that things are often morally ambiguous. Things are dirty, dark, and nasty and violent. There are very few true heroes. Yeah.
That very grimy existence where sort of one wrong step is sort of your doom, and you're always at risk of making that wrong step, even if you don't realize it.
Yeah, a lot of times I would say it's very close in terms of its themes to the noir genre. It's almost a fantasy noir in a lot of ways. Because there's a lot of betrayal, mixed motives for characters, a lot of
love triangles,
crime,
politics. Lots and lots of politics, especially in the game. I mean, I don't have much experience with the books, but I played Witcher 3 a lot. And yeah, it's a lot of, you can just fail missions because you talked to the wrong person, and then the other people just hate you now. And all those sort of politicking.
But in terms of like a lot of the things are going to be familiar to you if you've played even D&D, because there's humans, elves, dwarves, gnomes, a lot of different monsters, magic users, both mages and priests. But the biggest thing that they bring that's unique to the genre is the title name, Witchers.
Right, right.
Witchers are essentially also they have a bit of multidimensionalness. The whole sort of inciting incident into this setting is what they call the conjunction of spheres, where basically it got a little Rick and Morty where their dimensional portals open up and dumped a whole bunch of creatures and weird things onto this land. Originally there were only the elder races, the elves, dwarves, and gnomes, and then suddenly all this magical stuff appeared, including humans, and then, and of course, a shitload of monsters, and things went downhill from there. The humans took over; they became the majority in controlling. Although there are still elves, dwarves, gnomes around, and there's a shitload of monsters. Now, in order to fight the monsters, the humans created witchers. It doesn't explain how they, at least in the RPG, how they figured out how to make them, but they're essentially humans turned into mutants, and this isn't really explained too well in the game either. It's there's a quest that involves this kind of stuff, but it doesn't explain how they. Oh yeah, if we inject a human with all this shit, they become a mutant with cat's eyes and all this crazy powers. Yeah,
they do it a little bit like we'll get into this later, but in character creation, Witchers have their own chapter in the book that you have to go through for character creation. And it talks a little bit about that. But yeah, I don't know how they decided to let's just start kidnapping boys and pumping them full of weird magic until they are emotionally stunted, sterile, monster killing machines.
The things they're called mutagens, and apparently you can get them from just monster guts and bits that you inject into people. So they have a bunch of different little powers that they have, and they're also trained hardcore to become elite katana wield. Well, not katanas, but basically katanas.
It's basically katanas.
Yeah, swords. In order to fight monsters, you need special silver weapons in order to really hurt most monsters. And so they're obviously the Mary Sue kind of protagonists. They're very tragic. They're also immortal. They are ageless. They don't die of old age. So you can be a witcher if you want, but you can also be a wizard if you want, or you can be literally any other kind of person that you want. Although,
so like you said, Warhammer tries to have the same idea of you can just be a doctor or just a craftsperson or a priest or a merchant. Not everybody has to be a fighter and a rogue and a paladin. So tries to have sort of that charm.
And I guess you could balance a game for that, because you could literally, I'm a magic user. I can alter reality by saying a few words. I'm a witcher. I'm a badass with some magic and awesome fighting skills, and I can drink special potions that will kill anyone else, and I can do all this crazy stuff and be like, I can sing a song. I'm a bard. So
it's. We can get into that later. But I think there's.
But I think that, so basically in terms of the setting itself right now, there's a period of war and strife going on. So things are bad all over, and the monsters, which had been disappearing, and so people got rid of the witchers or persecuted the witchers, and so they're not making any more witchers. But they're ageless, so there's still some hanging around. And monsters are coming back. So oh god, we need people to kill the monsters, and that's kind of your setup. So. There's not a lot about the setting. There's enough to explain what the setting's going on, but it doesn't really give you unless you're already familiar with the games, it wouldn't really be enough in this tabletop role-playing game enough to really run a game unless you had a really strong idea of what you wanted to do anyway. It doesn't get this it's technically self-sufficient or self-contained, but it really kind of assumes you're only playing this because you already know the setting.
So they set it up by saying, your games are typically a few months before the events of Witcher 3, but if you've never played Witcher 3, that doesn't mean anything to you, like the looming hunt and the third war and all this stuff. You would have to know that.
Yeah, in fact, they do literally have a section in the book to explain, like, well, you can set your RPG based on your tabletop RPG based on this on what you chose in the first 2 video games, and here's how to navigate these choices. Here, if Geralt, did this, then this is how this would affect the campaign setting. So, yeah. And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the mechanics of the game, we'll get into character creation in a bit, but the base mechanic is roll a d10, add your stat and your skill together, and then see if you beat a target number, which is pretty simple for most simple tests, and certainly your attributes go up to 10, your skills, so when you're starting out, only go up to 6, so you can have up to a plus 16 on a thing if you want to be really good at one thing. And the target numbers seem pretty reasonable. Like an education check to remember what a magic weapon is like a 15. So it doesn't. But of course, we're not getting into combat, which obviously gets fairly complicated fairly quickly.
The game has a lot of subsystems that quickly stack on itself if you try to play it as written.
Yeah. I guess before we get too much anything, what are your overall impressions of it, the game as a whole?
I guess the thing that was most surprising to me, also unsurprising, is how much it's cyberpunk, basically, but recoded to be Witcher.
The cyberpunk
which is,
system.
I guess, sorry, Cyberpunk 2020, the system, which is understandable because then you don't have to like play test a new system, keeps development sort of in check. But at the same time, then it's kind of lacking a lot of the stuff that I think I want from a Witcher game and like what a licensed game should be. Notably that there's not really like explicit stuff about actually hunting monsters. Like you just sort of make a party of people in this dark fantasy world and then just sort of see what happens. There's less of like an impetus to investigate and hunt down monsters unless the GM explicitly adds that. There's nothing about like
which I kind of like in the sense that like you could just like I want to be a bunch of what if we set a game in a city and they're all just a bunch of thieves or whatever. Of course, then you're like, why aren't we doing Blades in the Dark? But like if you want to do like if you had a group of players who are all Witcher fans and they wanted to do something in that setting, this would be the game to do it. I think I don't know, but in terms of like grabbing, like what's the hook for this game is that it's the Witcher setting, and if that isn't a super great hook for you, it's not. There's nothing else about the system is really going to grab you because it's a competent RPG. I think in terms of like it has all the bits you need to run a game.
Yes,
but it's. That almost feels like sort of like like Dungeons and Dragons can get away with that, but like I don't feel, because it's got the name. But
yeah, and I think maybe there are different design considerations when you're doing a licensed project versus just if this game just existed in a void and there was no Witcher franchise, and you just wanted to make a dark fantasy Warhammer-y sort of world, would it hook people?
I think if this was an original setting with none of the video games, I don't think it would be crafted this way, because like I think the game would be restructured because this is about like being in an existing setting, and like not like you would have to mold the setting for a game about being a Witcher, and I feel like this game is not actually a really good. Well, I mean, I think it's perfectly fine, but like, it's almost a philosophical question. What does it mean to be a Witcher? Like, what are the important things you would want to capture in a Witcher game? And this sort of chose where we're going to simulate the entire setting and do all the things that you can do in the video game, but in a tabletop game. So I feel like the question is. What is philosophical almost at this point. Like, what should a Witcher game capture. And obviously we can, and the question is, do you want to capture what it is like to be a Witcher, or do you want to capture what it is like to be in that setting in which a Witcher can be a part of it?
Right.
Like, is this one person's story, or is this an ensemble story? And like the problem,
Right.
yeah.
Sorry, especially for a game that's sort of so defined by its like strong, famous protagonist in Geralt, that do people just want to be a Witcher? Do people just want to be Geralt and just romancing people and hitting monsters with silver swords?
I think that certainly that would be a part of it, but I think part of it is also like the video games and the novels are set up around a solitary protagonist who is very much a lone wolf. Like he's literally comes from the school of the wolf. Each of the Witchers comes from a different school, by the way, and they have different fighting styles and shit like that. And so the question is, but RPGs are very much, tabletop RPGs are very much about the ensemble. Like you cannot really like if you're doing like we do have RPGs that do one-on-one stuff, one GM and one player, like Cthulhu Confidential, but those are very much the minority. The majority is like you get like 3 to 4 of your friends together and you all go out, all your characters go out to do something. And so the question is then, and Geralt does have friends and allies who help him at certain stages, but not often, at least in the video game. And so the question is, when the story, the narrative, the setting has been structured to suit the journey of a solitary hero as he goes through all these adventures, how do you reshape that to be an ensemble of heroes who are all comparable ability, at least in different ways, and how do you make that satisfying? And I think this game tries to do that, and I think, I mean, we'd have to play the game to really, I mean, reading the book is one thing and making characters is one thing, but like we can't really tell for sure until we play at least one game of it, and we'll probably do that at some point. But I feel they certainly do that. So in terms of characters, like for example, they have 10 different classes of characters. I think it's 10 or 10 professions. Let's see here.
Flip through
4. Sorry.
8, maybe 7 or 8.
6,
I think
8, 9, 10, 11.
Okay.
Actually, 11, including the Witcher.
Fancy.
So yeah. So each of these professions gets a unique ability, a unique with 3, which I think is a sort of interesting innovation over the Cyberpunk Cyberpunk 2020 system, which in Cyberpunk 2020 you actually had a similar setup with X number of professions. Each profession had a unique ability. For example, Solos had combat sense, and they were really good at detecting danger and shooting first. And obviously, Netrunners had hacking, which no one else did. But in this case, you get the Bard's ability is busking, but then the Bard gets 3 every profession, every unique profession skill gets 3 skills types to a skill tree, in other words, to choose from. The charmer, the informant, or the manipulator for the Bard, for example.
Right.
And I don't know. I think that's a pretty interesting choice, and I do like that in the system.
I do think you have a lot of options to build different characters. There's a lot more, I think, sort of subdivisions between characters than initially apparent, which sort of became clear as I was making characters, playing around with the system. Yeah. I think there's probably, I don't know how concerned they were about like interprofession balance or how much it even matters. It might be like an irrelevant thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Like it doesn't matter that the craftsman is not as combat proficient as a Witcher, because you need the craftsman to make stuff to kill monsters anyway. So
yeah, I mean, kind of. I do have some interesting things. I mean, like the crafting system is really interesting, but like I feel like it's kind of flawed because they just kind of have prices for all the items you can craft. So it sounds like you can just craft items by paying. You can just buy anything you need instead of, like the whole point of the crafting system in the video game was that you literally could not go out and buy these items. Like you just had to fucking craft them because that was the only way you're going to do it. Because I remember in one thing I was like, I want this set of armor, so I'm gonna go fucking find all the goddamn diagrams and get all the goddamn ingredients. And
Yeah, and
yeah,
the game, tries to port a lot of that over, but it doesn't seem, I don't know how much it actually matters. So there are diagrams. It'll be like, oh, if you want to make this armor, you need, it's
yeah,
very like video gamey. It's like you need 3 steel and 1 cotton and 1 leather and a 5 thread. And then you can make, but like you said, I think you can just buy.
Well, I mean, they have a listed price for all the items, so it's like aside from the
Yeah.
relics, which are unique magical items. Oh, I want a berserker's axe. Well, I could pay 700 to craft it for just all the ingredients, or I could pay 1400 to just own it. And I'm like, maybe I'll just buy it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then I don't need to waste any of my skill points or abilities or time to fucking craft one. So. But yeah, I think this is all getting back to like, so I feel like they chose to do like people who like the video games who want to have a tabletop experience that's not identical, obviously, because video games are really good at certain things and not so good at others in terms of the RPG experience, like complex subsystems that go forever, and being able to hack apart 50 monsters and I'm just gonna wade through 100 monsters in this dungeon and gradually kill them all and heal up and kill more and heal up and blah 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 blah. So I feel like they were trying to do a reasonable facsimile. If you like those kind of things you do in the Witcher video games, here's the RPG to do them, but with a different cast. But I don't feel like it's especially suited for what the setting is ostensibly about, which is it's like, what is the hook for The Witcher for you? For me, the sort of got the most interest for me was the investigation and the negotiation of being like, monsters are like crimes that you have to solve. There's clues to figure out what the monster is, and if you get the clues wrong, then you're gonna prepare for the wrong thing. You're gonna get fucking killed by the thing you're trying to stop.
Yeah, so like the side quests or side monster hunting in the game has a very nice structure where you have a contract. You get a Witcher contract that you go talk to somebody, and like you said, you start to get hints of, oh, they have this curse or this hex, and oh, it's probably this monster. So I need to put this oil on my blade. I need to do this research to figure out how to kill it. And there's not this in here, but not really like laid out in a clear way where I think players, especially one who maybe they don't play RPGs, they just got this because they like Witcher 3, would be able to sort of realize that they can do that in this game as well.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I feel, and there are other things you could sort of replicate in the Witcher setting. Obviously, you could do games of politics and, military and sort of, the conquest of nations and, or criminals or living as monsters. Because there are intelligent monsters, which is, and their own lifespan, which is sort of explored in some of the expansions of the video game, like the Blood and Roses, I think, had a lot to deal with
Blood and Wine.
Blood and Wine, that's it.
Yeah,
had to deal with vampires. So I don't know. There's a lot. So yeah, I could see like an indie storytelling game aesthetic where you're like, this is this Witcher's journey. Let's tell a story about what happens to this Witcher as he walks the path, which is what they call their annual sort of cycle of, going around the countryside, killing monsters, then holing up for the winter in their traditional keep, and on, back and forth. So, but I guess we should get now a little more into character creation, because as part of this, we sort of you made 2 characters, I made 1 character for the game. So, how did you do, Burke? What did you create?
So I went through basically the steps as the book outlines them, where you pick your race, and then you go through. It has a life path, again, like Cyberpunk, where you sort of roll on what sort of fortunes and misfortunes and events happen to your character leading up to where the game starts. And then you generate stats and buy skills and based on what profession you pick and go from there. So the first character I made was a Witcher because, I mean, that's the particular character, and I just wanted to see how they feel to make, because they do have their own section, and I do get concerned whenever a game has a single kind of Mary Sue-ish special snowflake class. It's kind of the same issue I used to have with old Star Wars games and Jedi, where as soon as you introduce Jedi, you can very dramatically change a party dynamic as soon as you have one character that's like the highlight of the setting, and only one PC gets to do that. So I wanted to see how they feel. So I made a Witcher. There are racial perks. You can go through. I don't know how much you want to go through.
You don't have to get into specifics.
Mechanics.
They do. I do notice like humans. You know, it's very typical stuff. Like humans have ingenuity, and they and they have these traits, and they're elves are better marksmen, and you know they're artistic, and dwarves are tougher, and witchers have enhanced senses, and they're immune to diseases.
Dulled emotions because they've been tortured their whole lives.
Yep. Lightning reflexes, cat-like reflexes.
But
anyways,
so Witchers do have their own unique life path, because the life of a Witcher is that at some point in your early life, you are sort of whisked off to Witcher school and subjected to the tears of becoming a Witcher. So you have stuff like, when did you become a Witcher? You know, early childhood. What schools did you train in? And each school has various mechanical benefits. So this Witcher got the Griffin School, which is like magic. So you have +2 to kind of your magic stat, basically. How did you do in your early training, which also can have various mechanical benefits, which I think if I was running this, I would force everybody to roll. They say you can pick or roll, but I don't think I'd let people pick if people could just pick like +1 to all this stuff. Just me personally.
Yeah, I mean, like, I made so many allies.
I was the best Witcher ever. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it does have that kind of like min-maxing thing where like, if you get to, you really do get mechanical. Like, I have seen like there's systems like Rain that have done random life path systems where every single thing gets you a benefit, so everything is balanced. It's just in matters of where. And this one, they're like straight up, you have some bad things happen to you, and you make enemies, or like or you have siblings who want to kill you, and that kind of thing. This also, one thing they don't mention, like humans, it's easy, like it's one in terms of we're talking about that's life events later on, but like the first thing is like what happens to your family, what happens to your fate, or what happens to your family, what happens to your parents, and stuff like that. But like it's really easy to get stuff like min-maxed here, and so that's kind of a concern if you want to have a balanced party, quote unquote. But
yeah, I think that would only work if you let it happen randomly, and then if one person, I guess, happens to get a convenient combination, sure. But it doesn't feel quite as fun as like Warhammer, where you can end up with really hilarious mismatches where you're, like a highly trained fighter, but you have no weapon skill, stuff like that. It doesn't really seem like it swings that way. It's just you either get bonuses or you don't.
I mean, some of them aren't just purely like role playing, like your most influential friend. And what happens to your family and parental fate doesn't matter. It's just purely a role-playing thing. But your family status determines like whether you get +2 reputation or +1 luck, depending on how or if you get acquaintances. I mean, they're all benefits in that area, so I guess that's not too bad. But yeah, it's really life events where it starts getting really kind of unbalancing in terms of what it is. Also, they don't say like... non-humans in age, non-humans are long-lived, assuming they aren't killed. They can live for hundreds of years if they aren't murdered, if they don't succumb to a disease or horrible accident. So it doesn't give you game terms of like how many times you should roll in life events. It's like once per decade, right? Yeah, for every 10 years you've been alive. But like, so for a human, that's like 2 or 3, or if you're a starting out character, usually maybe 4. But for an elf, be like, I'm going to roll 30 times. Fuck you. And I'm going to pick 30 times. Like you can make, oh my God, let them pick it. And I was like, I'm 200 years old. I'm going to roll 20 times. And I won 20 jackpots. I start with 10,000 gold, 10,000 crowns.
Wow. I also have +20 to my primary skill.
Yep.
Amazing.
Yep, a Witcher owes me. I've been knighted. I had literally all of these. I have 20 fortunes. I'm the luckiest guy alive, and 8
Yeah.
allies, and yeah, bound by bond. Yeah, inseparable.
Yeah,
Jesus.
that's true. Yeah, I didn't think about that. That they don't scale the life events to the lifetime of the
Well, they don't even give
shell
guidelines
race.
like for elves and dwarves,
Yeah.
like how many times, because those are valid options. Like how many times are you supposed to roll for that? Like I only rolled 3 for my elf character that I made because like I didn't want to fucking spend here forever rolling random events, but I don't want to roll 10 random events either. And
Hmm.
alternatively, you can get really crippled because you can literally lose permanent attributes or get cursed or
Hmm.
haunted by the law, or a number of really bad things can happen to you if you roll poorly on this. And of course, then there's a whole romance table, which is just role playing, but like you know,
I'm also wary anytime you kind of introduce romance as a mechanic
yeah.
into games. That's
Yeah, that's a little. It's very
may not end well.
Yeah, it's very problematic when one of the tables is just whores and debauchery. It just meant
Yeah. Yeah.
you were just on Tinder the entire time.
Basically.
I don't know. What other thoughts do you have about it?
About character creation.
Well, about life events specifically.
Life events specifically, yeah, I think I would need to make more characters to play around with it. I think basically my primary concern is just keeping the game balanced. But I do think that if you have a group that can handle it, there can be like a lot of nice role playing sort of seeds that you can introduce later. So like the Witcher life path is a little different. One of the things you do is sort of how you lived your life kind of after you left the academy, but leading up till now, because Witchers are sort of ostracized from society. Like people are kind of scared of them because they're this relic of a much more dangerous time that people don't think they need anymore, but you actually do. So, you know, the outcome of kind of my wandering for this Witcher was that they were involved in like a really difficult hunt that's kind of left them sort of scarred. So then you could have that monster kind of be a focus, you know, like a Moby Dick type white whale that character can keep chasing and working towards properly defeating. So there are nice little sort of motivation seeds dropped in there if you can.
I mean that is
capitalize on them.
Yeah, that is one advantage for the GM is if you use this solely to help generate plot seeds for the adventure. Instead of like, what am I going to do for my Witcher adventure? I'll be like, well, let's just find out how screwed up these guys and the players are, and then I'll just base it on them, and then we'll go from there. So I do like on the next page you have your personal style value, which is also pure role playing, and yeah, so. Yeah, it's also, I mean, basically the same system that's in Cyberpunk 2020, which again is like, you know, an 80s RPG. So it's a very traditional kind of RPG, as you can tell.
It definitely feels like it when you're reading it. And
Yeah. The style is very similar because they have 2 main text of column and then just a side column sort of with little sort of side little bars that can help pull you in or just have little interesting things. But sometimes those are important mechanics. Sorry.
I was gonna say, yeah, sometimes they're like major mechanics and they're not separately indicated. So like a piece of text will be, oh, this has some effect, and it's like, oh, the effect is actually described in a sidebar on like a different page. But that's a whole other issue. But
So yeah, so there are 11 professions, each with their own special ability. I haven't read all of them in detail to see which ones, but obviously some are more powerful than others. The Witcher, the Mage, and the Priest all get magic, which no one else does.
No, and the Witcher has a major gear advantage because a lot of the professions have a list of gear, and it says pick 5 or pick some number from a list, and for some people, it's a fairly list of common things. So my second character, just to jump ahead, was a human bard. And the gear I had to pick from is like a Gwent deck, which is like the big card game in the Witcher game, a hand mirror, a dagger, a belt pouch. Those are like you pick from those. But The Witcher just starts with like your Witcher medallion, two swords, potions and oils, armor. Um, so that's a little weird, especially if you were to create a party without a Witcher, because if you play the games, you know you need a silver sword to damage a lot of monsters.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not a Witcher, a silver sword is extremely expensive, and it's fairly deep into one, like silvering weapons is fairly deep into one specific tree of the craftsman. So like Witchers have a huge gear advantage, which is sort of weird.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because I don't think you can just buy a silver sword. I think it's one of the profession trees for a craftsman.
Well, I think I'd have to look through all the items, but like it seemed that all the items you could craft had an element cost or had a price, because where the gear is described, like they actually have costs for everything. So let's take a look.
Yeah, so silver coating is the second tier for the improviser craftsman skill tree.
Yeah, but they don't have the Witcher weapons listed on it. So yeah, I guess the Witcher weapons are the only ones not listed on the swords.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess those are the exceptions to it. And they're literally silver. They're literally unbuyable unless so you have to, so that's why you need them. Whoops. Let's see here. Yeah, and even in the Elder Folk Armory. They have the Meteorite Sword. Does that count as silver?
I don't know if it counts as silver or if it's its own weakness counter.
No.
I think you'd have to look at the monster stats. It depends on.
Yeah, I mean,
monster.
it is. Yeah, these characters are not balanced for each other in terms of raw, like how much money you start, what your abilities are, and things of that nature. So it's kind of like spellcaster supremacy in D&D, but even more exaggerated in some ways because the Witcher and mages are obviously more powerful than anyone else.
And you don't have to wait until halfway through the leveling process for it to kick in. It's just at character creation.
Yeah, but as long as you don't lose that one silver sword. But then, of course, you generate your statistics, your stats, and you can either roll D10 for each one, which is not recommended, or you can just get a pool of between 60 and 80 points, and there's 9 attributes, so you could put 6 in all of them, and then have 6 points left over to allocate, and 6 is above average or slightly average. That's how I got my stats, and then just kind of figure out what you want to do, or in terms, and then you have to pick your skills. Skill list is a little. I felt kind of
So there's some there's some stuff I didn't like about skills. So you have a list of 11 skills based on your profession. You have your main skill and then 10 others. And some stuff I didn't like is that you have, was it like 40 some points to divide
44.
among them? I think 44.
Among
so
11
you can
skills.
put 4 in each.
Yeah.
But some skills cost 2. So you have to take that into account. And then they have the rule that you have to have a minimum of 1 in each skill, which I kind of don't like. I'd like to just have things that my character can't do. Just personally.
Well, it's also just kind of a weird way of saying. Just say they should have just said start your skills all start at 1. Your profession skills all start at 1. You have 33 points to allocate between them, because that's what it really is.
Yeah, that would be that would be a good way to word it. Absolutely.
And then, of course, you also have pickup skills, which you can put in anything, and that's just equal to your intelligence plus your reflex modifier, or statistic, not modifier. And the skills themselves are it's a very small skill list, but like there still seems to be some redundancy.
There's a lot of redundancy. There's like 3 versions of melee. There's like swordsmanship, melee, and small weapons.
Several different, there's different skills for different weapon types. There's also a courage and a resist coercion skill, which seems unnecessary. Like if you're courageous, you should be able to resist coercion, or if you can resist coercion, surely you've got some bravery.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess they think of it as like some supernatural fear of monsters. Like
Yeah. They
you stand
also,
up to that, but still,
yeah.
still.
Also, in terms of their social skills, they have a charisma, a persuasion, and a grooming and style, which elves all
Mm.
get. All elves are pretty like styling, apparently. And yeah, and then a separate seduction skill.
Which is, oh man, no,
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
have a seduction
I mean,
skill.
for
Don't
The
call it
Witcher,
seduction.
yeah. There's also a human perception skill, which is literally just tell sense motive in other games,
Mm.
which is
Hidden
also kind
sight.
of human centric because there are elves and dwarves. Like, what about them and gnomes?
Yeah,
Like,
can you not read their emotions? Are they just so inscrutable
or
and
witchers. Witchers are
bizarre?
considered a separate species now. Remember, because of their
Hmm.
mutations. So,
Yep.
yeah, it's. I mean, it's suit. It's functional. It'll again, but also like body, physique, and endurance. I
Hmm.
guess that's a little different because one is lifting things and one is just enduring things. But yeah, it just
It's
I don't know.
yeah. It's just some of it's weird the way they chose to divide
I
things up.
feel like this, The Witcher, especially. I mean, well, again, I think part of it is because they're deriving from the cyberpunk system, which had a lot of different skills. Because it was a technological setting, and there's a lot of different finesse between using a missile launcher and using a sniper rifle. I feel
Hmm.
like that distinction isn't as quite as clear between using a big bladed thing and a smaller bladed and a medium bladed weapon, or I feel like, I mean, I don't see how they could do it with this current system, but like something like 13th Age, where you just get a plus in, and then you just describe what it is. Like, I'm a sailor, so I'm
Hmm.
+3 to anything a sailor can do.
Yep.
And then it becomes a rhetorical thing for you to be able to justify it to your game master. I feel like that
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. I feel like, but again, this is going to appeal more to traditional players who want a more, you know, like, here are the skills. So yeah, and then of course, like, for example, one of the statistics in The Witcher is crafts. Your ability to use crafts and objects, which is obviously a substitute for technology, which is
Yep.
a statistic in Cyberpunk.
Yep.
And that's kind of the main part of, and then you have to buy your gear, but then that's you get you get some crowns to spend on whatever you want. But that's
Sure.
kind of the basics of character creation. Of course, mages can pick their spells. Witchers can pick what formula they know for what items they can make.
Hmm.
And yeah,
The only other thing, just to touch on real quick, is there's also a lot of derived statistics where you compute things from other things, and I felt like that was sort of needlessly drawn out.
a little of that's
Um,
okay. Like, hit points being based on body
yeah,
and will makes, I like that. I think that's a good
I
idea.
agree. I think it's more the way the information was presented because so you have like two hit point pools. You have your hit points, which is your damage, that's lethal damage applies to that. Then you have your stun pool, which is your like non-lethal sort of hit point reservoir. I think it was just an issue in that a lot of it was all the numbers are related, but they have it all laid out on these big tables for no reason. Like your stun pool is always twice your hit points, and your stamina is equal to your hit points, and your recovery, which is how many hit points you get back, is always just a fifth of your hit points. And like that could have just been written out instead of being all these big lookup tables for things. It has separate punch and kick damage, which I'm not sure that's necessary,
I mean,
other than to like
always
emulate the
kick.
game.
Yeah, except
Yeah,
you
always
should
kick.
always
Just
kick.
always kick.
Gives you a +4 damage.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's just stuff like that is
yeah. No, that's
kind
fair.
of just makes it. It just makes it. It's obviously not a big deal, but it makes it feel more bloated than it really is, and it just sort of sat. I don't know why it just sat wrong with me in terms of like how to present that information. It's just a lot of stuff that I wish was abstracted more than.
Yeah, no. And just to go back to, I found the difficulty sort of examples. So remember the resolution is a D10 plus your attribute plus your skill. So we'll say if your attribute is 6 and your skill is 3, so you have a +9 to your roll, and so you always do easy because that's a DC 10 that's breaking down a rotten door is their example. And then average is a 14, so you need 5 or better on a D10, which that sounds pretty about right. Challenging would be DC 18, so you'd need a 9 if your total bonus is a 9. Difficult would be hitting a chain with a throwing axe at 10 meters. That's a DC 20, and then nearly impossible with DC 30. So it doesn't say anything about exploding dice, so you only get so you can only go up 10 plus your attribute plus your stat.
Exploding only comes into combat.
Yeah, which
but not for skill checks.
And then of course for leveling up, I do like that they use a point-based system where you get up to 6 experience points per night, or improvement points, sorry, as they call them, and then you spend them to improve individual skills or abilities. You don't level up your character per se. It's just how many improvement points you've gotten.
It's like other systems like Shadowrun and stuff where you just buy more skill points.
It's pretty bog
it felt
standard.
I was concerned it might be a little slow in terms of how expensive stuff is. Versus kind of how much you get per session, which some people might like, but I think I would prefer to be able to get something like every 2 to 3 sessions instead of kind of every 5 to 7, especially because you might not play that long. So, well,
it's 6. Yeah, it says up to 6 IP points per game session. So, that's. It's again in that traditional game mold where you're only supposed to you're supposed to play the same characters for like a year or more, for like 20 or 40 sessions, which also is kind of incongruous with the lethality of the combat system, but I think that's also how the cyberpunk system kind of worked. Then they have reputation, which is sort of pretty much based on what the gaining reputation is totally left with the game master. There are a couple of things in your life events and other things that will raise your reputation, but it's 1 to 10. If they roll a d10 and roll under your current reputation, they recognize you. It's interesting that they actually do stat out the major characters of the Witcher series: Geralt, the
Yennefer,
all his friends. And they don't have reputation listed on the character sheets, the example characters. Like, we don't know what his reputation is.
I guess just infinite. Everybody knows him. I don't know.
Yeah. So
I'm pretty sure the game characters as statted are not actually achievable, like in any reasonable amount of play.
Yeah, they're definitely like, I've been playing for 400. They just gave them stuff. Yeah, like his...
Yeah.
Just looking at Geralt says his reflex is 14, which, and your potential, like, a Witcher can get up to 11 at character creation. So he had +3 reflex gains. I mean, not all of his stats are... I mean, he's got low empathy, he's got low luck. Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, he is a hoss. And then, skills up to 11, when, again, most people only get up to 10. Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, not that it matters. They're just supposed to give you an idea and kind of get you excited about it, because you're like, oh, I know who Yennefer is. I remember Zoltan and Dandelion.
Well, also, if you want to use them in your game, probably a lot of people who want to play this are going to want to do that. And let's see. Then we get into gear, just the listing of what it is. Pretty straightforward. Nothing really to talk about there. Then we get into magic. Magic is let's see. Well, they have the list of spells. Like, you have a vigor attribute, which represents how easily you can cast spells without getting exhausted. And then they have different spells for their minor, journeyman, and major and master spells. Pretty small spell list. I skimmed them. I didn't really see anything. I mean, pretty D&D-ish in terms of all. You have your healing spells, your damage spells, your, paralyze people and mind control them, and
elemental damage and
Things of that nature. It doesn't really explain how to use the rules. That's more in combat, isn't it? They do. I do like that they have curses and rituals and hexes.
Yeah, and the curses are actually pretty funny, and because so you can be cursed, and then you have to undergo like a specific set of actions to remove that curse. And they actually went pretty silly with it, where in a good way, where it's like a ridiculously convoluted. You have to like rub pig's blood on yourself while singing under a fig tree at the high moon on the first month of autumn. It's like literally that type of stuff.
Yeah. Plot seed kind of stuff easily. Although starting characters can start with hexes, so like they can put this on NPCs or other player characters. So I think you can definitely get some fodder as a GM out of those. The rituals are pretty standard, like far seeing kind of thing, see what's happened in the past or what's going on right now by staring into water or to fire, healing people, increasing your magic, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's just and then of course creating golems, standard wizard stuff.
It's very wizardy.
It's very wizardy. And then the crafting system, which is very derivative of what it is in the video game system. Although,
yeah, it's the way I thought about it is it's simulationist, but not simulationist for being a crafter, but for playing the crafting system in Witcher 3. It's just sort of that ported over.
It's basically, do you have the instructions on how to do it, the formula? If you don't, you can't do it. You can't. Let's see here. Actually, it says having the physical diagram in front of you grants you a +2 to your bonus. I guess if you've read it, then you don't need to have the physical diagram there to remind you. Then you have to have the ingredients, and then you just make a skill roll, and then you need to have. And then if you fail, you can make a check to recover your ingredients to try again. So, it seems most things are going to be able to buy. I mean, most of the weapons, at least the standard weapons and armor, were even things like the Berserker's Axe and the Crystal Staff and all these other things. But yeah, things like silver weapons and...
Not even sure you would survive long enough to be able to buy some of these things if you don't get them pretty quick.
Yeah, if you're facing monsters, like everyone needs to have a silver weapon, or at least all the people or magic. Like that's the only really way you can hurt them for a lot of these creatures. And then of course you can't really buy a lot of the alchemy things, the bombs and potions. But again, most of these potions are only usable by witchers. So, obviously anyone can throw a bomb, but it's just, I don't know. And then of course they have the components you can get from types of monsters and types of areas. So kind of basic and kind of, I don't know, also the grinding, getting all these ingredients and stuff like that. It doesn't seem like a really fun tabletop experience. Oh, you need 4 extra cotton to make the thread, to make the thing,
I was thinking about that because they talk about that in the book where they're like, oh, don't be afraid to have a exciting session where the characters just have to get the materials necessary to fight the monster next session. And I feel like if I was in a game that was just going out and picking berries for an alchemy potion, I don't know if I'm coming back next week. I'm going to go do something else.
I feel like if they had sort of abstracted it more to being if this was a Powered by the Apocalypse game and you just made a roll and be like, all right, in order to do the thing, you have to go, what's the ingredient you need? And make it a quest. And then let the players come up with they need one thing and then make it, it's the breath of an air elemental. Okay, well, that's fucking hard to get. How are you going to get that? Okay, well, we'll go the windswept cursed caverns of Dweenar. And so that becomes an interesting adventure where you have to go and gather a rare and magical thing. But yeah, just getting timber and iron or steel and combining.
That's what I was thinking. It does. It feels like Minecraft sometimes, where it's get 3 wood, 2 steel, 2 leather.
Yeah.
4 thread,
It also
5
seems
bones.
yeah, a lot of the stuff is unnecessary, at least in terms of the you absolutely need it to get to kill a certain monster.
In terms of having like an interesting game, like an actual really interesting approach would be doing something um, like maybe like Blades in the Dark, where it's okay, you're staring down the griffin, and you know to kill a griffin you need this oil. How did you get it?
Oh yeah,
Like
there you go. Yeah, yeah,
like a flashback type mechanic.
that would be good.
And then just get on with killing the griffin because that's what people want to do. They want to chop its head off and put it on their horse bags.
Yeah, but I feel he went to like there's something like the idea is interesting, but like it's partially undermined because you can buy most of the items. They have costs, so it seems you can buy a lot of the weapons and armor at least. And for the stuff that you can't buy, like it's either going to be beyond starting characters to craft immediately, like silver weapons, because they have to go so far down in the crafting subtable that, yeah, even if you had a min-max crafter, it would take him at least a couple of sessions to gain enough improvement points to get to that point. In which case, how'd you get to that point if you're, killed by monsters already? Or you just all be witchers. Like, they want you to.
Yeah.
So another part is, of course, then combat is super deadly. Yeah, and also super
have
complex.
Critical.
Yeah.
It is complex, but it does have crit tables.
Yeah.
Which I am a fan of, but we can get into that.
Yeah, combat the basic thing, the basic version of it is that you roll an attack versus an opponent's defense roll, and whoever gets higher wins. But then the more you succeed by, the more damage you do. And then there's a lot of, and then you have to roll for hit location. You have to choose for, like what type of critical it was. If you do roll really well, yeah, you have to choose whether it's a fast strike or a strong strike.
Yeah, it's funny. The first time I read through it, I sort of flipped through, and it seemed pretty straightforward. Like, oh, you pick your fast or strong attack. That's probably not necessary, but they're trying to do like the game. You can do a fast or a strong attack, and then you sort of get through kind of the basics. And then it has in-depth combat, and then that's when it goes into like all of these subsystems of special attacks, and it has all kinds of stuff where to keep track of as a player. Where if you so the way armor works in the game is you deal damage and then armor subtracts from that damage, and whatever's left over is what you take. But there's stuff where like if you take damage, then you have to mark off your armor, how much your armor absorbs. So you have to keep track of all this stuff and then get your things repaired when you're done fighting, which is cool. I like the idea of, your material also suffering the effects of overuse in combat, but I wish it had been abstracted out into just like a like status.
Yeah. Like, if you're about to die again, like in a Powered by the Apocalypse game, you would just like, mark a charge off armor, and when it's at 5, you need to repair it, or it's broken. So you get charges back by repairing it. I think part of this may be just preference. Again, I'm at this point, I'm not really as much of a fan of these kind of crunchy combat games. Especially if it's not a system that I'm really familiar with. I feel also like they also things like layering armor. And this is where I think the video game version of it does better, because the video game obviously processes all this shit for you.
Yes.
So you don't have to, you can just keep clicking attack instead of having to figure out the resistance rules for every single little thing.
Or like checking off damage to your weapon every time you block, and like stuff like that is so weapons have a reliability quality, which is like your weapon's hit points, and every time you successfully do a block action, you mark off 1 until your weapon breaks. So there's like a lot of that type of stuff to keep track of, and then there's various kinds of armor, and some of the heaviest armor absorbs like 30 or more points of damage per attack. So I kind of wanted to do like a simulated combat of just 2 people in full plate and just see how long it takes them to like whittle each other down, like just hitting each other with a longsword, just to see how long that would take, because I feel like that could get real stalematey real quick, depending.
Yeah, I mean, also with the critical, yeah.
Again, this is all stuff you have to play the game to get a feel for it. You know, it could just be overreacting, and you obviously, I think, have to play games to really understand how they work. But it's just sort of red flags of like, I could see combat maybe getting a little stale.
Yeah, we still need to play it at some point in order to sort of get a sense of it. But it does seem it's also a system that has critical hits, and if you upgrade your critical hit enough, it's a deadly critical hit, which is probably going to kill you. So let's see here. Beat defense. Yeah, if you beat the defense by 15, which sounds like something you could do pretty easily if the defender rolls really poorly.
Yeah, especially because in attacks, the 10 does explode.
Yeah.
When you crit.
Yeah.
So you can keep stacking. Especially also if you hit location, like the damage also scales with hit location. So there's like an X3 modifier to damage if you hit him in the head. So you could very quickly.
Yeah. And you can also lose like limbs, even if you aren't killed outright, in which case, in the world of Witcher, you might as well make a new character because that doesn't. It says the arm can be replaced with a prosthetic under dismembered arm, but I'm like, can it though? Because you're not doing so well with a wooden arm or leg in a world of monsters and medieval style combat. And
like a lot of the crit stuff, even on the lower tables, still feels like it should just be fatal, like given kind of the low tech medieval sensibilities of the game, like torn stomach. Like,
well, I feel a lot of those I think could be justified. Be like, someone. I mean, there are literally wizards who can magically just mend all that shit together. So if you have a friendly
that's true. If you have one,
hand, it just puts you in it just heals you. So yeah, but yeah, definitely also, does mention here monster resistance. All monsters except wolves are resistant to steel and take half damage from steel weapons. So this is pretty big. So considering how common monsters are, I mean, it's half
especially
damage.
in a game where damage determines your ability to penetrate armor. So like that half damage is the difference between maybe with a steel sword you chip away a few hit points around versus just being nothing.
That's a good point too. And then we have, of course, the magic rules. Magic is done by will stat plus spellcasting skill plus a d10, so you could easily have a plus 16 to your roll with the starting character. So then let's see here, but then you have you use vigor to do that.
I really would have liked a weird magic type table with like some backfires if things don't go your way. Like I think that would be like a wild magic. Would be interesting. I guess there's not any precedent for that in the game, but as I'm looking at the book now, I really would like a magic equivalent to all those critical tables of crazy stuff happening.
It seems like they can keep casting spells as long as they don't crit fumble things. Is a natural one always a fumble, or is it just
I believe so,
because it doesn't really say what a magic fumble is unless it's
so a 1 to 6 magic sparks and crackles and you take 1 point of damage for every point you fumbled by.
Well, that's the roll type, like that's the outcome if you get a magical fumble. So like how do you get a fumble? Is that a natural 1?
Anytime you roll a natural 1 on your magical attack, you must roll another d10. That number is your magical outcome.
Okay. Yep. So, 10% chance of causing, potentially blowing yourself up. So magic is okay, but
10% chance doesn't really seem to kind of mesh with the way like experienced spellcasters operate in the game. like if Yennefer had a 10% chance of blowing herself up every time she teleported.
Yeah, exactly.
That doesn't feel very good. Unless,
They also have things like vehicle combat, which I find interesting, or at least like a couple of sections on it, smaller section on it. But yeah, combat just seems pretty crunchy, pretty violent. So the game kind of discourages you from combat, but the whole game is sort of premised on a lot of violence in your game. So I do remember back earlier in the character creation, it says, "Oh yeah, make sure you have, if your character dies, maybe one of your siblings can take over for your existing character," which is
no, don't do that.
Yeah.
Just my advice is don't do the replacement sibling. It's very very high school.
Yeah.
Don't do that. You're better than that, people out there. But don't forget verbal combat, Ross. That's also
Is it
a thing? Yeah. It's at the end of the combat chapter. It's an optional rule for like arguing with people in politics.
Oh yeah, here it is. Yeah,
including romance combat. So red flag.
Yeah, not super great. They also have optional rules for different types of vulnerabilities, because there's actually some monsters were only susceptible to meteorite steel in the novels, which is why I guess that explains why there's meteorite steel. So yeah,
stuff like torturing people. There's like rules for torturing people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's thematically appropriate for The Witcher, but
no, it is. It is.
So then they have a pretty good section on the major nations and factions of the setting. What the world, what the central it's not the entire planet. You're just basically focused on this one continent.
Called the continent.
Yeah, that continent. And the not Europe, sorry. And then
yes,
they have
it's not Poland.
Yeah, that's not Poland. And then they describe all the major factions, the Witchers, the mages, all the different cults, and religion, sorry. And then basic GMing advice. It's and then we get into the bestiary, which I found pretty interesting because well, actually, no, that's a little further off. But, campaigning, Witcher gear, mutagens, then relics. And then we get to the bestiary. Bestiary is pretty interesting. Got pretty good illustrations for the most part. There were a couple that were oddly low res, but...
Yeah, there's some that look like 128 by 128.
Yeah, like they've been...
Look, like JPEGs that were blown up.
Yeah, in particular, the... insect things, the Draga, were pretty
yes, that's the one that stood out to me.
In Draga, sorry. Page 294, 295. But, again, it doesn't have a whole lot of, they have common superstitions about each monster, and then Witcher knowledge about each monster, which only Witchers have. It's literally their special ability, Witcher training, but which... is better than monster lore about the same thing. So, they... I don't know. They don't really have a whole... I would have devoted a whole chapter on investigating monsters in this RPG and, ways to generate clues or a system to generate clues for a monster. Something to make sort of investigating these things more interesting or more... give the GM more support to do this. And I hope if they continue this game line that they do a supplement for that, because I feel that's important. But
yeah,
it's pretty basic bestiary stuff. And then there is a starter adventure, which is pretty much you are hired to do a thing, and you're hired to kill a monster, but there's a plot twist.
Then the Nurgle. Oh wait, sorry.
Yeah.
Wrong.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just it's a very traditional game, very much in the 80s and 90s, very much in the cyberpunk, old school kind of style, and it has useful world building material if you're wanting to run this game. Certainly, if you're wanting to run a game in the Witcher setting, this would be worth getting just for the setting information.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if it's the kind of game that would support the kind of. I mean, if everybody was a Witcher or a mage, I feel like you could do a game that emulates The Witcher, at least with a couple of house rules. Maybe give the players some more improvement points to upgrade their characters, and certainly hand out more improvement points if you wanted a faster paced game. And but with that combat system being as deadly as it is, one hit from a bandit can end your character, even if he's a badass Witcher, unless he's decked in a lot of armor. But even then, yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. It's weird because it has like all of the lethality of like Warhammer, but without like the setting expectation to make that like interesting or fun. Because like Warhammer is kind of the same way, where you can just be some weird non-combat character and you just get thrust into a shitty situation and then you get killed. But that's like the setting conceit in a way of kind of like this gonzo weird grim dark world. But I don't think that people who want to play Witcher want to do that. I don't think.
Well, because the main thing in The Witcher is that you're the guy saving them from monsters. Like that's the premise, is that civilization is being threatened by these unnatural beings coming out of, the primordial.
Yeah, exactly.
Darkness.
There's the point is to be a hero.
Yeah. And
it's hard to feel like one in like a hyper gritty.
Well, not necessarily a hero, but like certainly a cut above the average person, and the way the game is structured, if you take something else, like everyone would have to know the system very well. And then like, do you have one person take that trap thing or like, I'll be the craftsman to make silver weapons for everybody, or like everyone's going to be a Witcher or a mage. And just ignore all the other professions, which, because a criminal might be helpful in the city, but he's not going to help you when you go between cities.
Yes, you're going to go stomping out into the bog with you to hunt down a hag. Probably not.
Yeah.
Neither is the bard.
I mean, it also, like what is the point of being in the Witcher setting if you're not doing what Witcher's doing? Like, what is it that compelling as a setting that you want to do a game about being small-time criminals?
And that can also be really challenging for a GM, is if you do have players that want to be all these different roles that don't necessarily coexist. How do you do that skillfully? It's sort of a problem with like, I'm thinking of like Shadowrun with implementing, deckers and riggers kind of like seamlessly into your game, because they might be just out piloting drones or just sitting on the Matrix. And how do you combine all these different narrative roles in a way that's satisfactory for every player, that they feel like they got to do the thing that they signed up to do? I think that can be challenging.
Yeah. I just feel like even like a game like Zweihander puts in a lot of work, and like, here's a campaign frame, or here's several multiple campaign models. You could set it in literally Warhammer, or you could set it in Roanoke, or you could set it here, and here are the types of things characters can do. And The Witcher, I mean, I understand that like they undoubtedly were working under a lot of restrictions from CD Projekt Red. Like, you have to do it within this framework that we want, and not allowing for a more experimental game. But it's a very conventional role-playing game. And to be honest, when I got the Witcher RPG, I'm not sure what I was expecting, but I got a very conventional role-playing game, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's still
not at all
interesting things about it. Especially, I think the thing I like the most about it is the skill tree system of the different crafts. I'm definitely going to look through those, and that kind of idea is very intriguing to me. What about you? What was your favorite part of the game?
My favorite part of the game?
Yeah.
I think just The Witcher is sort of my ideal fantasy. Like, I don't really like high Tolkien fantasy. So I do like the idea of having this low fantasy world to play around with. And, maybe it would be interesting to do something that is, whenever you have like a licensed product, I like sort of stepping away from the license and just sort of exploring that world, but kind of away from what it thinks you should be doing. So I do think there might be some interesting stuff with all these other criminals and craftsmen. But that's me personally. Is just, it's nice that you have the ability to do that. And it is overall like a pretty straightforward system. If you did have somebody who was into The Witcher, you could at least get them up and running by just saying roll d10 and add these numbers and just don't worry about all the specifics. So I would say those two things, from my standpoint, is what I like to play, is that I feel like I could play non-Witcher stuff in Witcher, which is kind of cool. And for just general players, I do think it would be easy to learn.
Yeah. I would definitely maybe also look into letting PCs, like, there's also one thing is the players do have a luck attribute, which allows them I forgot exactly whether it gives them a flat bonus to rolls when they spend it, or if they get re-rolls with it. Let me check. But like maybe having a house rule to allow you to spend luck. For every point you use, gain +1, but you have to use, so it gives you, you can spend luck to improve your roll. But like, I would maybe like spend a point of luck to downgrade a critical hit that you received, or something like that, to improve the longevity of characters, to have a more interesting campaign, especially one that's going to involve a lot of combat. So anyways, that's what we thought about the Witcher, or at least that's what I thought about the Witcher. Burke, do you have any final thoughts?
And
oh, sorry.
No, I think I just want to sort of clarify that even though maybe I sort of sounded throughout it like I was kind of down on the system, I still want to play it.
Yeah.
I still think it could be fun. All the stuff we talk about, like tools we wish it had given the GM, I think those are things that as experienced GMs, we know how to like manipulate. Sort of lacking aspects of systems. I think I'm just disappointed. I think if someone was just getting into the hobby because they liked Witcher 3 and they saw the game, I guess that's more where my disappointment comes from, is helping those people get into a new hobby. But otherwise, I'm super excited. I think we should definitely at least do a one shot of it and see where it takes us.
Yeah, definitely. And when we get back, we will have shout outs.
Hey.
And we're back. And I don't know what music I'll put in there yet, but maybe Vaporwave. Maybe not Vaporwave. Maybe
I don't know. It's very on brand.
Yeah, well, it is, but I mean, for this episode, do you think Dungeon Synth would be good? Because that's a thing now.
I bet there's Witcher Vaporwave. I bet it exists.
Dungeon Synth. And yeah, that's another thing. So I'll just Google Witcher Vaporwave right now.
Do it right now, right?
The Witcher 3 on VHS. All right.
Beautiful.
Yep. Well, that's on VHS. That's also just a screenshot. Anyways, so we're getting distracted. We need to talk about shout outs.
Shout outs.
So I'll go first. I've been playing some video games lately. Nice. One I want to mention, and these are reviews. They're not 100%. One is a video game called Garage Bad Trip. It's out on Steam, Switch, and I think the others. It's a top-down shooter / melee thing, a little similar to Hotline Miami. Pixel graphics, kind of an 80s vibe.
Is it hyper violent?
It is it's very hyper violent.
Nice.
You're not.
Beautiful.
You have a life bar. You don't. And you can carry around health kits, so it's not one hit, one kill. And you're shooting zombies and guys with guns, and then robots, and the story is you're in an underground parking garage, but you keep going down. There's like this whole underground base underneath it. And you're trying to stop this mad scientist from releasing a thing that's going to end the world, to turn everyone into a zombie or something like that.
Zombies.
Yeah, and he is just an unlikable protagonist, and everyone in the game is kind of unlikable. And there's a couple sequences that are really annoying, like a quick time event kind of thing where you have to get a motorcycle over a gap, but you have to avoid all the obstacles, or you won't go fast enough, or you'll blow up if you hit those red barrels.
It's Battletoads.
Yeah, it's fortunately I got through it, but like I did beat the game. The last boss is really annoying, and the basic gameplay is fun, especially in the first few levels when you're shooting zombies and blowing them up, but it just gets frustrating at times when you get to a robot factory full of robots, and it's just weird, metal corridors and robot factory things. It's just like, well, I don't know. It was 5 or 6 hours that I played, and I had fun. But by the way, this is a review copy that I received for free. So yeah, if you get it on sale for a couple bucks and you like that Hotline Miami kind of, well, it's not Hotline, just top down, like Smash TV and those kind of things. I mean, give it a shot, but I definitely would not pay full price for it.
Is it on Steam then?
Yeah, it's on Steam. That's how I play.
Okay. Yeah, just fall sales coming up. Keep an eye out for it.
Wait for a sale. But yeah, I mean, I did play. I didn't quit it. I did beat it. I did like it enough to finish the game. So take that for what you will.
That does actually mean something.
Yeah. So Burke, what about you? What's your first?
So first is Channel A reprint, which is currently on Kickstarter. It's a party card game where you pitch basically ridiculous anime plots to each other. Everybody gets a hand that has various just single words on it, like robot or samurai or moon or sakura, or just letters like R and Z. And then one person draws premise cards, which can be like ninjas and cat girls or harems or whatever. And based on the premise and the title cards in your hand, you pitch an anime with some title and you give like an elevator pitch, and then everybody votes on the best one. It's super fun. I got to play it for the first time at Gen Con. It's been out of print for a long time, so this is a reprint Kickstarter. They also have developed a web tool so that you can just play online. It just procedurally just generates, it just deals out a hand to everybody. And then, so if you want to check it out, Technical Difficulties did an actual play of it that went up earlier this week. So check them out and listen to them have fun playing it. It's a really fun game. It's on Kickstarter. It's only $30. I recommend it.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to say, I backed the original Kickstarter. I lost my copy. I think someone stole it from at Gen Con or took it away without realizing it was mine. Because I did back the original Kickstarter. But it's probably the best party card game that I've ever played. It's far better than Cards Against Humanity, better than Joking Hazard. It can be as innocent or as filthy as you want. And
I don't even really watch anime, and like I still got into it of just enough of the tropes that you can kind of make fun of.
I mean, those tropes have infiltrated mainstream society at this point. So it's
exactly,
hard to avoid them.
Exactly.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's like an anime version of What's the Game by the rights. It's It's similar to that if you've played that.
Tom played that in the last episode.
Okay.
Cool. So it's a lot of fun. I hope it succeeds. I backed it.
Same.
Next one is another video game, Lovecraft's Untold Story, which is currently in early access, and I did get a review key from the developer, so fair warning. It's a roguelike top-down shooter, pixel graphics, but it's set in the 20s, and you're dealing with cultists and shoggoths and spawn of Cthulhu and that kind of thing. And it's early access right now, but there is some progress saved. The way it works right now is you start as a detective and you go into a mansion, and the mansion is procedurally generated. So the layout changes every time you do, and you're looking for items, and you go around shoot. Fortunately, you have unlimited ammo with your gun, so I guess the closest would be something like Enter the Gungeon or Binding of Isaac. and you're just shooting monsters and finding items until you get to the boss, kill the boss, proceed on the next stage. In between levels, you go to the Strange Place, which is this Yithian chamber where you can store objects between runs and like go to different areas. And then, so I've only gotten to the hospital, the second area, and the second area right now is really hard because it's at Herbert West Hospital, and so there's lots of zombies and for some reason Migu as well. But the real problem for me is that the boss, this guy, giant abomination that runs around, has two forms, and I've killed the first form, but then the second form kills me, and that's really fucking annoying. And because like you get healing items, but healing items do healing over time, so you can't, even if you have a ton of healing items, you can only heal so quickly, and that thing can just fucking destroy your health really quickly. Also, no. You there's no real upgrades to your weapons. You can get different weapons. You know, you start with a shotgun, but then you can get, you know, a Tommy gun or a Winchester rifle or a police action shotgun, and you can't really upgrade them. So it's like Binding of Isaac or Enter the Gungeon, but there's not a lot of ways to customize your character build, or at least randomize it. There's two types of currency: money and information. And the information or clues, or I think it's called. And you both spend, but there's different stores that you spend them in, so they're just currency. They don't improve your character, except through the items you can get. So it's early access. I had fun with it for a couple hours at least. I hope they fine tune the balance. There's more unlockable characters. You can get, I unlocked a professor with some sort of mad scientist gun. Nice. And so it has a lot of potential. It just kind of hit a wall. And I just hope that the developers listening to this, that they give us more options to customize their character. Because I feel like, you know, when you watch Binding of Isaac, like the guy gets certain items, certain combos of upgrades make his character very powerful. And also lets the game play differently. But in this one, you don't really have that, at least right now. If you're the detective, you're the detective. Like, you don't really have a lot of flexibility. So, but yeah, it's still in early access, so they're still upgrading and improving.
There's still time.
There's still time. Yeah. So, what's your next shout out?
Next up, moving to the realm of television. I've been really enjoying the first season, the inaugural season of Castle Rock on Hulu, which has been airing over the summer, and the first season's just sort of wrapping up in the next couple weeks. General premise of the show is that it's sort of like a mystery, sci-fi, psychological horror, weird town, just set in the general Stephen King multiverse, we'll say. So it's not based on any specific story, but it has lots of little Easter eggs. Like the central sort of conflict takes place in and around Shawshank, set in Maine, of course, Castle Rock, Maine, and just really well shot, really nice pacing, a lot of really great performances. Andre Holland is the lead, who sort of rose up with Moonlight a couple years ago. He's really good as sort of the protagonist, and then there's just a lot of really awesome performances from people like Sissy Spacek and Scott Glenn as sort of town folk and whatnot. So I really recommend it. It's, if you're into kind of that Stephen King world, I think it's at least worth checking out.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of television or streaming, because it's not really on television.
This is on Hulu.
Yeah.
Whatever. I can put it on a television.
You can. On Netflix, they have a show called Glow, Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling. I just finished season 2 a little while ago. And we haven't talked about it on the show, weirdly enough, and it's a great show. It's one of those dramedies that's mostly comedy, but there's some drama in it as well. It takes place during the 80s, and it stars Alison Brie, I believe, as the struggling actress who signs up to become a lady wrestler on late night TV. And Mark Maron is the director. The very grumpy, burned out, kind of cynical director. It's got a great cast. There's like a dozen lady wrestlers in it. They're all fleshed out as interesting characters, especially by season 2. There's a lot of interesting arcs. There's this whole friendship enemy thing between Allison Brie and her former best friend because Allison slept with her husband, causing a divorce. And but they're both in the same wrestling show. So and
Drama.
it is very dramatic. And yeah, it's got great 80s music, and it's been pretty great.
So I haven't actually gotten to watch that yet. It's been on my list. Does it lean heavily on like 80s nostalgia, or does it just happen to be the 80s?
It happens to be the 80s. I mean, they play songs on occasional, but it's really the strength of the characters. One thing that's really interesting to me is they really emphasize the economic precarity, I guess, the precarious nature of their economic situation, not just of the main character, but of everyone, because they're making very little money, and most of these people are doing it because they need the money, and like things are always very dicey, even up with the producer, like whether they're going to stay on the air or not.
A lot of down and out folks, and
it's just down and out. Yeah, it's it's like a red markets kind of. We gotta keep keeping on.
So what you're saying is you need a red markets worldwide wrestling crossover.
I think that would be pretty amazing. I mean,
you got economics of being like a low tier wrestler.
Like there would be some form of professional wrestling in the red markets world. Like
you have to pay upkeep on your knees.
Well, I mean, like it would probably be in the recession, but like people need entertainment, and like wrestling's pretty cheap to put on if you don't give a shit about what happens to the wrestlers. If they have to take care of their own injuries, if they don't have to if you don't pay for their medical bills, you can always get some young idiots willing to risk life and limb to get the roar of the crowd.
Is there no employee insurance in the loss? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, no. There's no employee insurance in the recession, let alone the loss. That's true. A special Layton's only league where they're literally in a cage and they have to fight around casualties that are all biting at them. So, yeah,
Layton, make them wrestle a vector or something.
That might be a little hardcore because remember vectors are fresh. That means someone just died for that show. That's a little less, yeah. Anyways, something to think about. Let's see. Do you have any more? You had another
shout out.
Yeah.
I had one other. Yeah. Just continuing on with just recommending games. I had a chance to read Scum and Villainy on a very long flight, which is a system based on Blades in the Dark, but set in space, where you play grimy criminals trying to make ends meet in sort of the outer rim, roughly, of a galaxy, sort of on the edge of society. And I really like the system. I think you can do a lot of interesting stuff with it because it's, like I said, it's very grimy. So you can really hit players with hard consequences for really make them feel the difficulties of kind of scraping by on a life of crime. So it has a lot of stuff of like keeping your ship up and keeping your politics in line and being able to get the right gear for the right job. It's like Blades, where you just you do a job, and then you have sort of free play between jobs. And I think you could run a really interesting short campaign of sort of a group of criminals trying to get by.
Yeah, I actually have plans to do that.
We'll see how it goes.
But yeah, it's something to work for. I have two more. Sorry.
Go for it.
Yeah,
go for it. No.
I have two more shout outs real quick. One is Babbling Corpses, the Vaporwave and the Commodification of Ghosts, which is a book about Vaporwave. It's a short book.
I'm into it.
It's a critical analysis of it. It's got some interesting connections between it. It's a critique of capitalism and the theory of hauntology. And which is a whole thing, and so it's if you want to understand what Vaporwave's all about, you should read this book.
Sounds like a book for everybody.
Yeah, well, everyone should know about Vaporwave, so yes.
Agreed.
And finally, then of course I want to give a shout out to XCOM War of the Chosen expansion for XCOM 2. I finally beat it, although I did also install a mod list of 176 mods
Jesus.
through Steam Workshop. I've watched the videos of Christopher Odd. He's a YouTuber, Let's Player, and
Okay.
basically he was doing the hey, let's play XCOM 2 with all these mods, and I'm like, and then there's like a one button subscribe to this collection of mods, and then it automatically downloads and installs all of these mods. A lot of them are cosmetic, like you can play with Ghost in the Shell, like you make your characters look like Ghost in the Shell characters, and voice lines like a Tommy Wiseau voice pack, or characters from Red versus Blue, or any number of things. And then, but there are gameplay infecting ones. Like I installed ones that added a bunch new tougher enemies to the game, late game enemies. Like I said, the Gatekeeper. There was the Rift Keeper, who was an asshole. Then yeah, there were just so many asshole enemies, and then it especially modifies the last mission of the game to be about 8 times as hard as it should be. It just yeah, it was ridiculous. Instead of like average mission for me was like 40 minutes. The last mission took me like 4 hours because there was just so much to slog through. Yeah, but I beat it.
Like, and the game still runs okay with that many mods. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
'cause,
It's pretty. Yeah. Sorry.
no, I was because I think of like I used to do modding for like Fallout New Vegas and stuff, and I don't think I could put 175 mods and still have
Yeah.
it even load.
Yeah, but a lot. I mean, because again, a lot of them were cosmetic or minor gameplay, and a lot of them were just adding new enemies, like variants of the Viper. You know, instead of just Vipers, there was Mambas and Cobras and Boas and Flaming Vipers and stuff like that that had different abilities, but were all basically the same character model, but with a different. You know, just the Flaming Viper was red instead of green. You know,
I see.
So
Okay.
yeah, it was. A lot of them are pretty like low resource requirement. So, and yeah, so a lot of them were obviously use at your own risk. There were a couple of crashes that I had to fix. Well, a couple of things like I had to go into one time I had to go into the developer console to fix because an enemy spawned out of bounds of the map, but it was there, so I could see it, but I couldn't reach it with any characters. So I had to open the developer console to teleport a guy right onto his little space so he could kill him. But yeah, it's fun. And even if you don't have the mod, well, get some mods at least. There's a ton of really cool mods in the Steam Workshop for the game. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's definitely fun. And then finally, of course, we have an anecdote. And not really anecdote, really, because we've been doing campaign prep, or I've been doing campaign prep for 2 campaigns that I'm going to be running for RPPR. Hopefully we'll finish them. I'll be able to post them. One is going to be Scum and Villainy, which we're going to do the campaign prep for tomorrow, or at least as of this recording. So hopefully we get a good game of that. But I'm also doing Unknown Armies, a mini campaign. And Unknown Armies, we're doing one. The theme is on treasure hunting because there's a long and rich history of weird-ass treasure hunts that are connected to the occult. You know, especially with like secret societies and ancient and Atlantis, you know, and shit like that. So things like the Money Pit on Oak Island, which is literally like, oh, Captain Kidd buried it. He hid the gold of the Freemasons. I mean, the Illuminati. And people have been trying to dig it up for centuries and never found it, of this tiny ass island in Nova Scotia. To the thrill of the chase, this rich guy who buried a bronze chest full of supposedly of gold and jewels and hid it somewhere in the Rocky Mountains, like 100,000 square miles. And then he published a poem to say that supposedly reveals its location. And so tens of thousands of people have tried to find it. And he's alive. He's done it. So anyway, so taking on these, so basically instead of doing the standard Unknown Armies campaign creation thing, I said, your goal is to find this mystical treasure or this treasure. And it's buried in the Mississippi River. And there's 4 tasks for it. One, you have to find the treasure map for it. Then 2, you have to summon an angel to bless a dowsing rod. Then you have to get a ship because it's on the Mississippi River, and only then can you actually find the treasure.
That seems like a lot of work.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a treasure. I mean, it's buried by Koya Amaru, the pirate queen, who figure I made up. Supposedly a pirate queen in the golden age of piracy, who was a descendant of Tupac Amaru, the last Incan leader, who was, of course, executed by conquistadors eventually after he led a rebellion that lasted decades. So anyways, Koya is supposedly descended from that, supposedly became a great pirate, then sailed up the Mississippi somewhere to bury the treasure. So we have 4 players for that. David, Bill, Greg, who's from the Grapevine, a couple of RPPR one-shots, and then Caleb. Caleb has not made his character yet, but we have David, who's playing the Vestamancer. Clothes make the man.
Okay.
And the man, that magical man. Greg is playing the Dipsomancer, which is where booze makes you magical. You have to be drunk in order to have magical energy. And then Bill is making up a new adept school, and I'm helping him. We're writing it together, called the Phonomancer, which is about the power of voice. And he has to record his voice 24/7 in order to, or that breaks his taboo. So we're working on that one. I'm not sure what Caleb wants to make, but we'll have that session. We did character creation for the most part, and we'll do campaign starting soon, hopefully. And
very cool.
That's something to be aware of, to something to be on the lookout for. So hopefully,
keep an eye out.
Yeah. So anyways, this has been RPPR episode 159, the Witcher RPG breakdown. I'm Russ Payton. Say goodbye.
I'm Burke.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
All right. We'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.
Later.